We hear the meeting?
At this time, Lisa Young will take a roll call to see if a quorum is present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I called your name, please respond. Walter Bouchard.
Here.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Kelly McKenzie.
Here.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Present.
Thank you. Mike Denby. Mike Denby. Steve Trussell. J.C. Porter. Dave Barry. Danae Pressler.
Present.
Thank you. Robert Vondenacker. Stephanie Garcia. Derek Castaneda.
Present.
Thank you. Ed Stillings.
Here.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Here.
Thank you. Hondo Judd.
Here.
Thank you. Monica Rabb. Spencer Camps. Rick Williams. Kim Butler.
Here.
Thank you. Aaron Cooper.
Present.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro.
Present.
Thank you. Rhonda Humbles.
Present.
Thank you. Matthew Potzler.
Present.
Thank you. Scott DeBias.
Present.
Thank you. Ramona Simpson.
Present.
Thank you. Stan Ballone.
Present.
Thank you. Kristen Watt. Tim Connor.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Kamakawa. Jonathan Futch.
Present.
Thank you. John Woods. Michael Chamberlain. Robert Forrest. Susie Stevens. Thank you. Did I miss anyone?
Robert Vondenacker, City of Buckeye, present.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. A quorum is now present. The meeting of the MAG Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table at the back of the room and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table in the back of the room. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Agenda item number 2 is a call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Do we have any request to speak cards?
Madam Chair, as of today, no written comments have been received.
Thank you. So MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website for up to 1 hour prior to the meeting, and we do not have any written comments. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 3, approval of the February 23rd, 2023 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Prior to approval, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on agenda item number 3? And staff, do we have any written comments on this item?
Madam Chair, we have no written comments.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the February 23rd, 2023 meeting minutes?
Tim Connor, so moved.
Thank you, Tim.
Ramona Simpson, second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Tim Connor and a second from Ramona Simpson. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. And those who wish to abstain from the vote, say abstain. Okay, we will move on to a roll call vote of all members participating virtually. And that will be taken at this time by Lisa Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Walter Bouchard. Walter Bouchard. Michelle Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. Kelly McKenzie.
Aye.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Mike Denby.
Aye.
Thank you. J.C. Porter. Danae Pressler.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Vondenacker.
Aye.
Thank you. Stephanie Garcia. Derek Castaneda.
Aye.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Aye.
Thank you. Hondo Judd.
Aye.
Thank you. Monica Rabb. Spencer Camps. Rick Williams. Aaron Cooper.
Aye.
Thank you. Rhonda Humbles.
Aye.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Tobias.
Aye.
Thank you. Stan Ballone.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Aye.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa. Jonathan Fudge.
Aye.
Thank you. John Woods. Michael Chamberlain. And Robert Forrest. Did I miss anyone?
Yes, this is Walt Bouchard. Aye.
Thank you, Walt. Madam Chair, we have a unanimous vote.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4. We have the CMAC annual report, and this will be presented on by Dean Giles of Maricopa Association of Governments.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We're pleased today to provide this congestion mitigation and air quality improvement program annual report for fiscal year 2022. This is for the period that ended September 30th, 2022. Federal Highway Administration guidance requires that an annual report be prepared This specifies the projects that obligated in the prior fiscal year and the expected air quality benefits. The report was submitted to the Arizona Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration, Arizona Division Office in February 2023. The CMAQ annual report contains 26 projects. In the table, each project includes the description, cost information, and the estimated emission reductions in terms of volatile organic compounds, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and PM10 in kilograms per day. Projects in the report previously came through the committee. At the time, projects were evaluated prior to project selection for addition to the TIP. And MAG staff calculated the estimated emission reductions for the CMAQ annual report using project data that was submitted by the project sponsors in the project applications. MAG worked closely with the Arizona Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration Division Office staff on the report. Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, hearing none. Agenda item number 5, the draft suggested list of measures to reduce ozone in the Maricopa non-attainment area. Tim Franquist with Maricopa Association of Governments will be providing the presentation. And this action is to recommend approval of the draft suggested list of measures to reduce ozone in the Maricopa non-attainment area to the MAG Management Committee.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I will just go through a brief presentation. I think, many folks have seen kind of some or all these slides, but just to kind of tee up where we're at in terms of the action item here, taking a look at this list. So we'll just kind of jump into it. So we'll just do a quick background. What does the non-attainment mean and kind of what's next for us? So in terms of the planning area, if you see the light blue map here, this is the MAG planning area. What we can see here is the actual non-attainment area for ozone, and it encompasses most of the planning area for MAG, which is pushing the size of the state on the East Coast. So it's a very, very large non-attainment area. Again, just in terms of a refresher, what causes ozone precursors, and I think it's really important when we start to get to the actual suggested list, bioorganic compounds, which come from trees, solvents, coatings, and wildfires, oxygen, nitrogen that comes from heavy trucks, vehicles, and stationary sources. That's got to react in the presence of sunlight, which obviously in the Valley of the Sun we get plenty of. And that, of course, makes the perfect storm, unfortunately, for ozone. First and foremost, I think it's important because as we get caught up in a lot of the measurement discussions and a lot of the economics of it, I think it's important for us to kind of pull back for a moment and just talk about what the ozone standard really is based on. And it is a federal health-based standard. And so ozone can cause breathing difficulties, can aggravate lungs for asthmatics, cause asthmatic attacks, cause burning and watery eyes, coughs and scratchy sore throats, inflame the lung ways, make it more susceptible to just disease. Now, I think that's particularly important these days as we see emerging viruses like COVID. So the things we see kind of on the left of the slide are symptoms that we would see impact usually a person with a pre-existing breathing issue. The stuff on the right impacts folks with a pre-existing breathing condition and healthy adults. So I think the thing to take away from this slide is that, ozone, it does impact your health, and that can be everywhere from a vulnerable adult all the way to a child. I think it's also important to note there that children do breathe as much or more than an adult does. They just breathe more time per minute than an adult. They have a smaller body and a less developed immune system. So this is when you hear us talk a lot about ozone impacting vulnerable adults and children. It's a very real situation. Just in terms of kind of where we're at moderate for the current standard. That current standard is a 70 parts per billion standard. The two measurements you see there in 2021, the 76 to 80. The 80 is the upper range with wildfires included. Again, just to link that back to public health, that is the air that we're breathing. The 76 represents with wildfires excluded. The 2022, again, what you can see there is the upper end with wildfires, the 81. And then the 77 represents what we believe if we were excluded wildfires. again, I just think it's important to highlight that upper end, that 80, 81, one, we're trending in the wrong direction. And two, that is the air that we're breathing. So I think it's just important to note that it is a public health standard, something we just want to be cognizant of. In terms of the ozone non-attainment requirements, obviously the most desirable state we can be in is an attainment. But when that doesn't happen and we don't meet the standard, we typically start off at marginal non-attainment. Next, we move into moderate. That's where we're at today. As you can see here from the slide, we typically get 3 years to attain those different standards. And if we don't do that, we get moved up in classification. And I also think it's important to note that each of these classifications build on each other. So these are not separate individual programs, that each of them continue to build with more regulatory programs and more regulatory programs over time. I think what's really important to start to take away from this slide is this moderate to serious, and we'll talk about it in a minute. And I think we've talked about it many times in terms of air quality permitting. This moderate to serious change that we're up against is a significant change in the threshold for that air quality permitting threshold, particularly as it results to offset. So again, we're on a very, very short, tight line to really start to get controls implemented before we get to serious. I think we really need to start, thinking about what serious looks like to us. Again, we want a sense of urgency on this because the faster we can get back out of attainment, the better. We get those ozone offsets back off us. But really, from a public health standpoint, that's just better for our community. Should we not make the serious timeline in that 3-year time frame, we go to severe. This is where we start to look at very real California level controls. Again, nothing against our neighbors, but a lot of the very extreme controls we see in California, this is where we would see them start to be implemented here in the region, and then extreme if we continue to go down that path. Again, just in terms of where we're at, we can see that the dotted lines there on this table just represent the different standards over time. Again, doesn't take an air quality expert to notice that this happens somewhat frequently and that those standards do decrease over time. So again, it's a health-based standard. As more science is learned about the impacts of ozone, they do go down over time. What's also important to note there is the EPA has a statutory requirement to look at these air quality standards every 5 years. They can do it sooner, but they have to do it at least every 5 years. And again, you can see the trend is downward. So in terms of measured concentration, what you can see here is we've been doing a really, really good job over the last several decades. But what we can see on the darker blue line is this uptick. And that uptick there represents our data with wildfires still included. So again, the air that we're breathing. The lighter green line there represents what we believe if wildfires are excluded. And you can see there the alarming piece is that you get an uptick in both of them. So again, we're trending very much in the right direction, but something that's very much happening here in the Valley. And I think there's a lot of different things that play into that. But the reality is the green line is the line that we're looking at from a planning perspective. And you can see there that it's a 77 parts per billion delta. So I know the folks that do this every day, we know what that means. That's a Grand Canyon level delta. For folks that maybe want kind of an analogy, and so not suggesting this, and I have to caveat that because I think this has been taken the wrong way a few times, but that 7 parts per billion is equivalent to the emissions of 4 million vehicles or more. So it's a huge delta from here. Now, not suggesting we remove 4 million cars from the roads. What I'm just saying is in terms of the size of the issue, the emissions impact, it is very, very significant. Again, just in terms of where we're going, this slide also continues to highlight, again, we're just trending in the wrong direction. So for many decades, we were heading in the right direction. Things were going good. But in 2017, we started to see that uptick. So we're seeing that here in Maricopa County. This is also a monitor associated with the non-attainment area. Again, the trend is we're simply just going up right now. And so again, what we just want to show and represent here, this is not just a downtown Phoenix issue. The header on this slide is actually incorrect. This is the entire entire air quality monitoring network for the area. Most of these do measure ozone, but what we want to show here is that we have monitors all over the Valley. This is not just a downtown Phoenix issue. This is actually an area-wide issue. Again, where we are in terms of emission controls, we have 93 emission controls already on the books today. So there's no small number of controls that kept us stable for a very long time. And again, I think it's important to recognize that we have a lot, and they've done a lot here. So they look like things like vehicle emissions testing, federal tailpipe standards, emission controls on major NOx and VOC sources, coordinated traffic signals. I think it's important to note that our transportation improvement plan and our state implementation plan complement each other. So we see traffic control measures. This is what they kind of look like. There's several more. Clean burning fuels, again, very impactful. But with over 90 of these controls in place today, it's very, very likely we're not going to meet that standard. And I think we do really need to start to bite that bullet and say, you know what, we would have to attain this standard really by this summer. And so the discussion that we're having now, things would have to be implemented. We'd have to drop to 70 to even give us a fighting chance. Now, I don't want to say that to discourage us. We need a sense of urgency. Again, it's a public health standard. People are breathing this air. And so we do want to return to compliance as soon as possible. And two, the faster we can get back into compliance, the faster we get these ozone offsets off us. So it's really imperative, even though this seems like a impossible feat, again, it's really, really important for us to keep a sense of urgency about it. In terms of deadlines, again, I think this really highlights, while the attainment deadline is 2024, the EPA is going to be looking at deadline data from 2023, so this summer. So it's a bit frustrating, I think, for us in the air quality world. The deadline is a year from now. You'd hope that the deadline is a year from now, but unfortunately, they will be looking back at this summer. So we talk about a very, very challenging timeline. It'll include this discussion, implementation, and then boots on the ground, emission reduction. So one of the things I've been highlighting here is if you have emission reduction programs planned, please continue to do those. We can continue to develop the SIP. As I say, the piece of paper can follow. What's most important is that we see emission reductions at the monitor. So again, we just want to encourage folks, faster is better. Because even if we miss the timeline, the faster we can get back out of Sirius is equally as important. Again, just highlighting where we're going next. This threshold between moderate and serious, this is where we do expect a lot of discussion with our economic development organizations, and those conversations are already started. The moderate to serious shift changes a lot of regulatory requirements. It changes a lot of air quality permitting requirements. And then again, if we weren't to hit this 2027 deadline in Sirius, we are looking at severe, again, nothing against our neighbors in California, but a lot of the extreme controls that we read about, it would look a lot like California here in terms of the things that we have to begin to investigate to bring our emission levels down. So what does that mean for business? Again, I'll go through this relatively quick, but I think this is important because these pieces dovetail. So when you're in a non-attainment area, if you're a new major source or a major modification to an existing source, before you build that new source or make that modification, you have to find an emission offset from somewhere. That can come from an ADEQ emission bank, or that can come from a private credit. So if it's a large company, they may have these actually in-house. They just haven't posted them. There's no legal requirement to do that. In some cases, they do post them. You have to get those credits and an air quality permit here from Maricopa County Air Quality Department before you can turn that switch on. So this is where we talk about emission offsets are a problem today, but right now it's impacting really, really large sources. So things like Intel expansions, or if a new utility was to come in. So it's a very large facility today. If we were to shift over, which we likely will to Sirius, now we're looking at mid-sized businesses. This table just to illustrate that. So this is the Clean Air Act requirement offset table. Again, today we're in moderate. So the threshold is 100 tons per year. Again, this is a very, very large facility. It looks like an EGU, a new microchip manufacturer. It's very, very large. When you see that shift over to Sirius, now we are looking at more medium-sized businesses. This could actually be a large hot mix asphalt plant, could be one of the data centers, could be a large coating operation. This is where we expect it to impact a lot of industrial businesses, not all businesses, but a lot of businesses. So again, we've been having a lot of conversations with GPAC. We'll be talking with AG Chamber of Commerce, because at this switch, when we switch over to this, I think this is going to be a challenge for our area. And why is that such a huge issue? There are no emission offsets in the area. So again, if we were Texas or California, we're heavily industrialized. They generate a lot more of these emission offsets. And Maricopa County has been doing just incredible work, working with both senators, and a lot of public pressure to talk with the EPA about how we get some help with these emission credits. But I think it's been mum is the word right now. So I know they've been developing rules that have sat on the books for multiple years. And again, both senators have actually contacted the EPA. And unfortunately, things aren't moving. So this challenge is on us today because we are moderate non-attainment. It becomes worse when we go to Sirius. So again, big takeaways. We are moving towards serious non-attainment. This will impact most businesses. Emission offsets do escalate again under Sirius, and there's no emission offsets in the bank. So what's next for our area? So this is one downtown monitor just to kind of show where we're at. In the blue, you can see boundary conditions means emissions outside this area. The reality is, only EPA, California, and EPA in California can regulate tailpipe emissions. Obviously, we can't regulate outside the boundary areas. So we are looking at a much smaller subset of sources. It's probably no surprise that a municipal planning organization is talking a lot about transportation, but it's also important to understand that the air quality people are now talking about transportation. So when you hear about our Prop 400 extension, there's a reason why we're advocating hard for multimodal transit, is because what you can see up there is the largest local emission source are cars and trucks. The problem is we can't regulate them from a tailpipe standard. We can't do anything really but advocate hard for public transit systems. The trip reduction program, those are all very, very good programs that help us. Otherwise, we have to backfill those types of programs and find something else to fill those types of programs with additional regulations. Again, construction industry, non-road is what that refers to. So again, what you can see is a slice of the pie for us is very, very small. And just to kind of illustrate again, this is not just a downtown Phoenix issue. This is a monitor you can see all the way out in Tonto. And again, it shows roughly the same percentages. Again, it's just important to note that the areas that we would regulate is very, very small, and it comes down to a very small group of people. So again, just a plug for the Prop 400E extension. Again, it's very, very important for a lot of different reasons socially, but it's a big time air quality issue too, which means it's a public health issue and then an economic issue. So what does this mean in terms of costs? What we can see here is in the first year of marginal, this is a study that we scaled at DEQ some time back. So it's a little bit of an older study. There is some expenses up front, but it's substantially jumps. This is an annual cost. It substantially jumps when you're in moderate, and you can see it jumps again. So right now we're expecting somewhere in about 100 million, conservatively $100 million per year of impact to our local economy. That jumps somewhere to about 250 million in serious, and then continues to grow exponentially from there. Here's a more recent study that was pulled from Oklahoma City and Corpus Christi, two areas that don't have nearly the size of economy of our local region. And if you do the divisions here, you can see that it roughly comes out to several $100 million per year that you're in non-attainment. And just quickly, how those costs allocated, it can be through offsets. It could through increased costs of producing a unit, more stringent controls, missed opportunities. So this is something we have just recently spoke to GPEC about. Two of the biggest issues that new companies are talking with us or talking to them about is water availability and emission offsets. We know this is not just a hypothetical issue. This missed opportunity and bringing in businesses to this area is a very real thing. So this kind of brings me really to the draft list. So just want to thank a lot of our partners here. I think a lot of folks participated in the workshops. This is no small undertaking. The things that you'll see on this list, this is obviously by no means exhaustive, but vehicle idling, tailpipe standards, again, those are federal. Diesel retrofit is a possibility. Alternate fuel replacement, so going from gasoline or diesel to EVs. New composting rules. It sounds like there's some real promise there as well. Low emission stoves. Again, that's something that, again, most people don't expect when they see these types of lists. Gas lawnmower bans. Things are getting quite real here. Additional impacts to EGUs. So just in a nutshell, what we need to reach our attainment goals is a pretty substantial reduction in both VOCs and NOx. And you can kind of see up there, these are in day, this is per day. So these are substantial over a year. Again, I think this is really important. I know we talk about this being a very, very big challenge. How do we get there today? I just want to remind folks, it is a public health standard. So the faster we can help, our community breathe better air, the better. Two, from an economic standpoint, the faster we can get back into attainment, the better we can help our economy. Because again, the best emission offset that we can get is the one we don't need. So again, just in terms of why we're here today, this is kind of a long-winded way to bring us to the draft suggested list. I think there's something in the neighborhood of 108 measures on that list. One thing I really, really want to point out on there is it is just that, a suggested list. Our contractor went through the nation to say, hey, these are potential options. Voting for the list does not mean we advocate for it. Here at MAG, we're not advocating for any one or all that on that list. It's just a menu of options. So I think that's really important to note is some areas may be able to implement it. Some entities may be able to implement it, maybe not. So what you're looking at today is a list of potential options. And then what we'll go through later on is a process through the implementing agencies. Is this viable technologically, economically? And so again, today's vote would not be that we advocate for it or we approve all these measures to go into place. It's simply to identify that these are a menu of options that we will take the next step and then start talking to the implementing agencies about, can we start to implement this? And again, there'll be another stakeholder process, I'm sure, through the county, the state, and then potentially the municipalities as they look at those. So before I open it up for questions or comment, what I want to do is, again, thank all the participants of these workshops. I think it was extremely helpful. The feedback we got really helped inform our process, inform the list that we have. I want to really thank our environmental division here, particularly Matt Poppin and Lisa Young and Elias Toon. They put together these workshops. Again, that was no light lift. And again, I think it was really, really important to get that feedback. So again, I think it was a very successful stakeholder process. And we, like I say, thank all you guys for participating in that. So with that, Madam Chair, I conclude the presentation. Myself or Matt Poppin's happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions in the room?
Madam Chair, we have Mike Denby with a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, everybody. Tim, thanks for the great presentation. Greatly appreciate it. My question for you is actually back up in your slides when you're talking about the change from moderate to serious, the major source threshold dropping from 100 to 50. Am I right in assuming that drop from 100 to 50 means that it's not just for new units or new businesses, it's existing businesses that are maybe at 75 tons that now will have to be subject to RACT or something like that? Is that correct, or is it only for new sources?
Madam Chair, Mike, yes, it would once the threshold changes, it's going to impact new and existing businesses. In fact, we do have Kim Butler here. I do think those 50 and over would become Title V sources as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, Mike, this is Kim. They would be subject. Anybody who has a permitted threshold of 50 tons or more of either NOx or VOC would be subject to all the Title V rules, all the RACT backed, whatever ends up falling for each one of those. And we estimate, and don't quote me on this number because I'm not in permitting, but we estimate there's probably going to be 50 or so more companies that will either select to take lower permitting limits to stay under 50, or will have to have their permits adjusted to becoming a major source Title V facility. That being said, if they're already permitted and already active, they don't have to get offsets. But if they expand, they'll be under the same regulations for the offsets at that point. So now we've just tripled our pool of people, doubled to tripled our pool of people looking for offsets at that point. So to Tim's point, that becomes even more and more critical and a higher ratio. So that help, Mike?
It does. So you say they won't need offsets necessarily unless they're expanding, but will they need to do like RACT and other sort of remedial measures on their existing emissions, or they get to stay where they are with their existing emissions?
The answer is kind of. It'll depend from site to site. Some of them are already doing RACT at the as a non-Title V, so they'll stay doing RACT. But some of them may have to start implementing BACT. It's going to be permit by permit. We'll have to go through these. It's also going to mean the same RACT analysis that we just did for our RACT SIP, the piece of this that we do, and we analyzed all of the Title V facilities. We will have to go through and analyze all the rest, all the new Title V facilities when we do the serious plan and ensure that they are meeting RACT. So there'll be a complete look through on those. At this stage, I can't tell you 10 of them will need to. I have no idea, of course, but it's going to be a matter of finding who's going to be falling into that category at that point. So the answer is yes, most of them will probably have to make some changes, but don't quote me on how many or who.
Appreciate that, Kim. And does the county anticipate having to hire new permit writers Title V permit writers, or is this like if you're tripling the amount of potential Title Vs, that could be pretty significant for the county, I would think.
That can be pretty significant. And we are looking at workload at this stage as well already. So yeah, it's possible. You'd have to talk to CJ more on how much he's looking at that, but it's definitely a possibility. We'd also be looking at more inspectors because a Title V facility is a more involved inspection. And, we have 6 inspectors right now who do Title Vs. Well, 6 positions. I'm not even sure they're all filled, but so yeah, that it's entirely possible that we'd be looking at additional people. We may need additional people in rules to write the rules. We may need, if we have to expand our rules and change those for RACT, I doubt it. We may need additional for emissions inventories because now we're changing up that. So, I mean, there's entirely possible, but I can't answer you a straight answer that yes, we know we're going to go get 6 more engineers. We don't know at this stage. So.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions online? Any questions in the room? Go ahead, Ramona.
Madam Chair, this is Ramona Simpson, Town of Queen Creek. And so to kind of follow along with that, so the area includes Pinal County. And so how, and I think Pinal County might be on the line. I'm not trying to put them on the spot either, but with development possibly happening in the Pinal County area of the non-attainment, how is that? Is Pinal County going to be ready and set up and available to do similar things with inspections and permitting for those types of larger facilities that may hopefully come to the area?
Hey, Ramona, this is Scott DeBias with Pinal County Air Quality. We have a good example of how to do things in Maricopa County. Obviously, they have a lot more capabilities currently, but we are definitely keeping our eye out. I can speak to what you have alluded to. I mean, the potential new source interest in our portion of the county that's in non-attainment is continuous. And obviously with the non-attainment designation and the impending moderate to serious non-attainment possibility, that definitely puts a lot of those possibilities on hold because of the offset issues. And so we're obviously following closely with what Maricopa County has done and is doing. And we're, staffing wise, we'll address that when the time comes. But in the meantime, we're doing the best with what we got. And yeah, we're working on it, and we'll be working on our ozone RACT rules similar to what Maricopa County has done or is in the process of doing. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. And I also want to maybe mention that if it is a brand new facility that comes online, that they might hopefully be meeting even back to if they have the new technology that is working towards these emission controls, that they are able to build within it. So I think as we kind of look at that and develop that, because as you said, we want businesses to come to the state. And so we need to find ways to maybe outreach and make sure that we're meeting their expectations of businesses coming, and then how can they meet those requirements, whether they're in Pinal or Maricopa, it's going to be the same level. So I think bringing economic development into this conversation is going to be really important. And I appreciate, Tim, your remarks to clarify some of the things. Might have been me that was a little nervous about what we were voting on and this extreme list. But I appreciate that it's a menu of options to choose from, and that stakeholders will have an opportunity to commit and make recommendations as we move forward. So I appreciate those comments, and I think that will be really helpful as we go back to our groups and organizations, and then as you move forward up the MAG chain there too. I think that was very important. That last comment was very important, so that we don't get too concerned at this level, and that we do have some opportunities for making comments as we move forward. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kim. Oh, Susie, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Susie Stevens with Western States Petroleum Association. I did want to highlight that WISPA has submitted written comments as well. But just to ask a little further on that, I know this is a menu of options, but where is the prioritization, or where's the analysis of, these measures will result in emissions way down the road versus soon to try to meet this pending deadline? When is that happening in full, or is it only happening by each implementing agency for their particular measures?
Madam Chair, I'll take a crack at that, but I think Matt Poppin can jump in there. It is an iterative process that we were going quickly, but I think that's it is the next stage. Once we get through this list through both management committee and then regional, is that menu of options is now live. Then commitments go out to say, okay, is this technically feasible? Can you do this? That's why I say when we look at this time frame of trying to get these things done, implemented, and working, it would have to be somewhere around April to June. June would be kind of the latest. So we would send out those letter packets probably in the next few months, and then that's when we would start that discussion of, okay, this entity said yes, so Maricopa County can do X, Y, and Z rules off that list that impacts this many facilities, and the emission reductions is Y. State can commit to Z, Y, and A. The emission reductions associated with that is this chunk. And so unfortunately, we're not going to know probably until somewhere around June-ish of what is actually coming back to even know, okay, are we anywhere close? What that delta is. And then I imagine at that point, we come back out and say, we're still 4 parts per billion off. We're still going to have to look at additional controls. But let me turn it over to Matt, because I think he can give you kind of a more detailed process. But I think it's a great question, Susie, is okay, what does there look like? And what is that, bogey? Matt, I think you can probably explain that.
No, I think that's a good summary, Tim. I would add that really when we were putting together this suggested list, the goal was to get as many measures out there as possible for folks to evaluate. We totally understand the implementation challenges that exist here. One of the other thoughts is we know it takes time for EPA to act as well. So the reality is we probably won't get bumped up too serious, even though our attainment date is 2024, until sometime in mid 2025. So even if folks cannot make a commitment to have rules in place or controls in place for this summer, if they can then say, well, we think controls can come online in 2024 or 2025, those will be really helpful as well. It won't be helpful for us in terms of submitting a moderate area plan, and we're struggling with the challenges associated with that because we realize how difficult these things are to implement. We wanted to get these out there. The emission reductions and costs are estimates, ballpark estimates, just so folks can have a rough idea. We understand they'll likely change quite a bit based on individual companies and permits. But again, the thought was, let's get those out there. Let's see what folks feel like they can commit to. Maricopa County will be going through stakeholder process if they have to change rules, similar with the state as well. And then local jurisdictions can check, for things that if they want to submit commitments, if they choose to, they're going to be working with their public works departments and various other and their city councils ultimately to see if they want to make commitments as well. So the idea is we have a huge challenge ahead of us to meet the standard. Let's get this out there. We realize it's a little different for the moderate area plan. And I think most of us realize it's going to be an extreme challenge to make moderate, and it's probably unlikely. So let's get this out there now. And if this helps towards serious area requirements, that'll be a bonus. So I don't know if that's helpful, Susie.
Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, Kim Butler from Maricopa County Air Quality. Just a couple of things that we wanted to kind of put on the record with this. I appreciate your presentation. I definitely agree with that and agree with much of what you're saying as far as this is critical. This is critical that we start looking at this. The numbers that Tim had up there from last summer versus 2021 summer, and they were going up. We had fewer exceptional events that last summer than we did the previous summer as well. So there wasn't as much that even could be taken out as an exceptional event from the wildfire. So that was something so the general baseline is continuing to go up regardless. And so that's something that we definitely agree with. And there's definitely something that has to be looked at from that aspect. And so we agree on that. The question, I have one question and then a comment also, but let's start with a question. When you're saying, you're going to look at all of these commitments as they come in and we come back and we're, 3 points short or whatever it is, what happens at that point if nobody else has anything else they can commit to?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kim, I think that's a scary reality that we're dealing with. So not to use the shock card, but what we would be on is a path toward a FIP. So right now, as most folks know, but there may not be, is right now we're the planning agency that can submit the state implementation plan. If we can't get enough commitments where we can't show attainment, that puts us on a 24-month clock that the federal government has to by law. And I'm sure there's NGOs watching this right now that the federal government would have to step in and implement a federal implementation plan. So again, nothing, no knock against our neighbors in California, but that would be San Francisco looking to regulate the Phoenix metropolitan area. And so this is why when we say this is critical and to do local, there is a second option, and that is that the federal government steps in as a matter of Clean Air Act statute and does this for us. Again, that puts us on another clock. So once that happens, we also are dealing with 2-to-1 sanctions in 18 months past a formal statement where the EPA would come out. And so let me back up. So what we would get is a failure of finding to submit would be kind of the first stage. If we can't get that commitment, we just go on too long. 18 months after that is when the 2-to-1 offsets kick in. So we talked about the 1 to 1.5, the 1 to 0.12. At that point in 18 months, it would be 2-to-1. So again, that would definitely get some people's attention. If in 6 months later, we still did not submit a plan that showed compliance, that is when they have the option to pull our regional highway monies. And again, that would stop every project in the area, I believe even the private. So anything that's in our transportation improvement plan gets locked up at that point. So it's a major, major hammer. So again, I think being over here at MAG, having the transportation and the air quality kind of dovetailed, our transportation improvement plan and the SIP are very much tied together. Transportation and air quality, as we know, are very much tied together. So the hammer is it's not an option that somebody doesn't submit a plan that shows attainment. If we can't do it locally, then the federal government will step in. Now, there is a couple other options in there. One of them is the implementing rules do say that if we can't show attainment within this area, the state does have to step in to look outside the area. As many of you know that have statewide projects, the state is heavily controlled as well. And so we think we're squeezing water out of a rock as it is. State wouldn't be much better, but that would be the one next area. The other next area is taking a look at international transport. So there is an option called the but-for analysis that you would attain the standard but-for emissions outside this area. We do know that somewhere between 2 on a very, very high end in a bad year, it could be 7. I think DEQ did some modeling and it's about 4. That probably sounds about right if you split the difference. So we do get impacted by the international emissions, but it's my understanding from our modelers that's not all the time. That's mostly in the early spring and summer. And then by midsummer, we're switching over. So that complicates that matter too. It's not steady state. So the same controls that would deal with one, not necessarily going to deal with the other, but you could potentially do an international transport demonstration. But we know from what the EPA has already told us, that bar is way up here. It's a very, very high bar. What they've shown through, their guidance document is what it says is if your local emissions are over your international emissions, they will not approve a plan. For emphasis added, they sent us 2 disapprovals already, one from Utah and one from Texas, just to let us know they're not kidding. So it's there. It is an option. We know guidance is not law, but that is another potential option. But I think the very real scenario, that aside, is really the issue of a federal implementation plan. If we can't show that attainment after we get a failure of finding the submit, that puts us on that 24-month clock. And then again, it shifts from local controls to potentially San Francisco.
So,
I'll just, this is Matt Poppin, Chair. I'll just add one other kind of maybe technical thought to that too. Another reason why this list is why we tried to make it so comprehensive is so folks have a chance to publicly respond and say, hey, we've looked at everything. We've tried to do everything. This is all we can reasonably do, EPA. And we have justification to maybe start looking at different options saying, hey, the region has done all it can reasonably do. And we're still not going to make it. What should we do? So that's another reason why we think it's important to give stakeholders a chance to say, hey, this measure, we think we could do it maybe in 2025, but we can't do it now, or it's just, we're never going to be able to do this measure. So that's another reason why the comprehensiveness of this list, let's throw everything in there that we think has somewhat of a possibility, is important too. Implementees can respond with justification for why they choose to or why they don't.
And this is Scott Tobias of Pinal County. I don't know if this is where Kim was going with this, but a thought came to mind in regards to what she was asking. We're going to have to go to the Board of Supervisors with a commitment resolution. I'm assuming what Kim was getting at with that question is we're going to go do that once and then potentially have MAG come back and say we need more. It would behoove us to make sure that we get it done what we need the first time around, rather than going back and trying to get on another board agenda with another resolution of commitments that may or may not pass through them, the second time around. So I don't know if that was what Kim was getting at, but that thought came to mind when she brought that question up.
And Madam Chair, and to both Pima and Maricopa County, we're happy to help model. So as you guys do that, I get that you don't want to be going back to your boards every couple of weeks saying, okay, hey, we have a new list, we have a new list. So as you get what you think is a potential, come back to us. We're happy to put that through the models and say, okay, we're at X, we're at Y. That way, again, you can go one time, hopefully, and that get us to done. So hopefully that'll help a little bit.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Tim, sorry. Can that be offered out to the cities as well as they try and model this out? Because I think this is going to become a cumulative effort that, we as the county can't do every piece, but now can't do every piece. It's going to have to be a cumulative. And so it would be nice to know as this is going along, how to sound like, one of the dial-a-thons, you get the thermometer, is it filling up? So.
Madam Chair, that's exactly right, though, is we're happy to help any municipalities, any commitments that folks send us. We're going to obviously have to quantify that as well, because that's what has to be in the plan. So yes, to certainly any MAG member, we're here to help, regardless, but I think that extends out to even any of the businesses that want to take a look at that. Again, it's really going to be important to see what that bogey is. So just let us know how we can be helpful. We're here to literally do that for everybody.
I would say too, I don't want to put our ozone modeling staff on the spot, because it does take a lot of resources to actually run the models, but perhaps we can come up with some cut points. So for example, if we get 20 tons of VOC reduction, we think we'll be at 73. If we get 40 tons, we'll be at 72. Things like that, so that they don't have to constantly rerun, but maybe if we come up with some cut points. And again, I'll say also, we know models aren't perfect. We know they are predictive tools. We've seen that. And so if we feel like, hey, we're making good progress and that just the modeling isn't showing that, there's other avenues too. There's weight of evidence demonstrations that can be done. So it is possible to submit a SIP where the modeling itself, the computer modeling, doesn't show attainment, but you have to have a lot of other evidence to say we think we're going to make it by X, even though our models aren't showing it. So we're just going to have to see how things develop. But we would like to have that information available for folks as they're starting to make commitments.
So this is Mike Denby. I have a question for everybody, I guess, whoever's been talking here. So Tim, you're talking about the sort of the heavy hammer of EPA and the FIP and all that stuff. That's not going to be triggered by the lack of commitments you get in the next 6 months on this thing, is it? Or is this, what's the commitments? To me sounds like a separate part from submitting a SIP and then getting denial and leading you to the FIP route. Am I mistaken?
Well, Madam Chair, members of the committee, they actually go together. So unfortunately, when we got bumped up to moderate in October, we already passed the deadline. We got 2 months to do this. So I believe we got knocked up to moderate in October. The plan was due in January 1st of this year. So we're technically already 3 months behind. So EPA will have a non-discretionary duty at some point to say a plan is due. Again, this is where we see the NGOs step in and start to sue. So we're not encouraging any of those, but we're developing this plan as soon as possible. But no, we have to have those list of commitments at some point, because that is what goes into the plan to show, to demonstrate attainment. If that doesn't happen, that the EPA will on their own or be compelled through a lawsuit to do what's referred to as a failure of finding to submit. And that's where the hammers kick in. So they actually all build off each other. So we need the list of commitments to put in a plan to show we do have a plan that reduces ozone to the levels that are compliant. Like Matt said, that could be done, mostly through a modeling, but we can do other exercises to get there. But at some point, we got to submit a plan very, very soon that demonstrates compliance with this standard. I think to Matt's point, I think if we have this comprehensive list, and I commend him on that, this was his idea to get a good comprehensive list to show that we have looked and kicked over every single stone. We've talked to everybody that can implement this. Here is what the realistic level is. I think if we go through that process, we have done something or more. That's a compelling argument to the EPA, but at the end of the day, they have a non-discretionary duty at some point to say either you got a plan in place that shows attainment, and yes, you got those commitments that will be implemented, or you didn't submit a plan. That's when that FIP clock starts. So hopefully that answers the question, Mike, because they actually all, it's a big puzzle piece, and all those puzzle pieces have to be in place, particularly these commitments, before we can submit a plan. If we don't submit a plan, or worse, if we submit a plan and it gets disapproved, and I think that's the other piece. If we were to put in a plan, the EPA disapproves a plan, that actually causes an instant transportation conformity freeze. So what we don't want to do is put a plan in that we haven't, very, very much vetted and justified to say, hey, we do believe this gets us across the line. If we just stick in anything, well, then that becomes a disapproval, and that becomes an instant transportation conformity freeze. And that is everything in the tip, including any private developments going forward. And so again, that's going to get a lot of people's attention. So again, the Clean Air Act is very directive. It says thou shalt do X, Y, and Z. And so the plan does have to show very real commitments and emission reductions to avoid the disapproval, which would be the absolute worst, or we can't get to the bogey, in which case we get that failure to find and submit. That's a very real likelihood, just because we are past the due dates. Not the end of the world if that happens. I think we've been under those clocks before. But again, when I say this sense of urgency, even though this summer feels impossible, and boy, it does feel impossible when we get these things in place, the faster we can get these commitments in place, even if it is August, even if it is next year, is really, really going to matter, because at some point within that 2-year time frame after the failure of finding and submit, we're still going to have to show a plan that gets us into attainment. So again, it's a running clock, and we're moving in a way where the ground is falling beneath us. And again, that's just to give us a sense of urgency, not to shock us or give us a sense of we can't get there from here. I like to harken back to the carbon monoxide days. I think that was the same conversation. I think the conversation we're having today is very much what was happening on carbon monoxide. Impossible standard. How the heck are we ever going to get there? If you look at around about the 1993 timeframe, there's actually another uptick in carbon monoxide. They're probably having that same freak out that we're having now. It's like, what the heck is going on? A lot of smart folks came together. They had these, tough conversations. And then when you look at the carbon monoxide concentrations around 1996, 97, they drastically fall off. So I want to say that because there is success down the road for us. It does feel somewhat impossible. So I will harken us back to the carbon monoxide days, very akin to what we're dealing with today, very challenging standard, but working with our partners, having these tough conversations, we got there. And I'm sure we can get there again today. But again, whether we get every single commitment by June this year, or like Matt was saying, we get them by August or even next year, it's going to be critical to show compliance with that standard. And again, we will work with folks to, model that, justify that, so we know what those, I like what Matt was saying with the cut points. I think that's a really good way to look at that. But a very long-winded way of saying, Mike, is no, those commitments are absolutely critical to an approvable plan. Otherwise, we are on a different clock, and that clock is, looks like the federal government stepping in.
And so by commitment, you mean all they have to do is the county has to say, we've run the numbers, and it looks like if we take these 3 measures and write rules about them, we should be within the framework or within the number that you're after. Does that, that's just, that's what the commitment is. The commitment isn't actually doing the rules yet, because that's going to take a while. You can get those done by August.
Well, Madam Chair and members of the committee, so you're mostly correct, Mike. The commitments will manifest almost certainly in some kind of rule. Again, unless a municipality decides to do an own ordinance, again, that's up to them to decide if that's pertinent or not. But again, what I like just to continue to reiterate, the state implementation plan is a pack of paper proving that the things that we're ultimately going to do is going to reduce ozone concentration. So it is going to take a while for rules to get written. The reality is, and you're coming from an EGU, you can't just go bolt on stuff tomorrow. There's engineering, there's supply chain issues. So no, we don't expect, even with the commitments, things to change tomorrow. There's another whole process behind that. That's why we say, looking at August of 2023, it feels pretty impossible that we get from here to there between now and then on just writing rules, talking with our boards, buying supplies, getting the engineering. It's going to be a heavy lift. But yeah, the commitments look a lot like that as a formal package that come back to us, say, okay, no, these people have basically legally said yes to this. Could be 3 rules. It could be 50 rules. I don't think it'll be 50. Kim's laughing at me. She need a lot more people to do that. But the reality is, yes, it'll manifest itself in some rules. Pinal County the same way. State could possibly do that as well. So any statewide issue there, fuels, though, again, I think we've kind of tapped that one pretty good. But again, we're just looking at everything like Matt said, so we can say we've kicked over every single stone. Our clean burning fuels in the today are basically CARB phase 3 already. So it's a good thing and a very tough thing, because we are getting the low hanging fruit has been taken. And so I just want to say that I commend everybody for doing that. A lot of folks have been on this journey for a long time, and we've grabbed those low hanging fruit. VEI, the Vehicle Emission Testing Program, is already in and done. Like I say, clean burning fuels is already in and giving us incredible benefits. And that's why we produced 108 measures in the today, because we've grabbed all the low hanging fruit. And the stuff that comes next is there some stuff it sounds like with composting, some of the fuel hoses that look like they're pretty good emission reductions, but we've grabbed a lot of that stuff in the today. So again, Mike, it's a kind of a long way of saying is yes, those commitments are legal commitments. They'll manifest themselves in a rule, but those rules and whatnot, they've got to be kind of memorialized in our state implementation plan, and that's got to be submitted in order to keep that failure to finding to submit from happening, or to get that failure to find to submit off us.
I think there was one more question online.
Madam Chair, we have 2. Kelly McKenzie first.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Kelly McKenzie with ADQ. This is more just a comment rather than a question. So I do want to thank everyone for providing the list of draft measures for reducing ozone. We've had a look for it, and we did notice there was a lot of measures that were listed at a state level. And generally, we are supportive of the measures that are cost effective and will be helpful to retreat to the next. But also, we will need to have legislative support if we are to be able to implement any of those. So we just wanted to put that comment on the record. So thank you.
Kelly, I'm sorry. We were receiving feedback.
Oh,
So-
I am so sorry. Would you like me to start again? Is that any better?
We're still receiving feedback.
Oh, I am sorry.
If you have computer and your telephone on at the same time, that might be the feedback. Mute one or the other.
Oh, I do not. I just have my computer. Let me see if I can figure it out, and I will get back to you.
Meanwhile, we'll go to Tim Connor, please.
Hi, thank you. I guess I got a couple of questions. First is, will we be able to push the transport issue out and use that as part of our plan? And the second follow-up is, can we also count on MAG or the county to provide us with the questions or the measures that we think we need to take to our city councils to ask for approval for, with a hierarchy of approvals? I'm just little concerned. There's so many different, I mean, we give them 114 or 100 and some odd, measures. They just will not understand that. So will somebody be setting those priorities? Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. So I'll take the first one first, the international transport. So that's very much on our mind. But kind of back to the way the EPA, looks more favorably on these types of demonstrations, that we try everything, we kick over every stone. And then if we still can't get to that bogey, and we really do feel like there's international transport impacting us, which we may, we can at that point, I think, have a much more favorable chance of actually getting an approvable state international transport demonstration done. So again, we think it's more of a kind of a second process. Let's see what we can implement here. How close do we come to the standard? If we're pretty darn close, we can start to look at those international transport issues. I think if we start the other way, we're almost certainly going to run into a situation like Texas and Utah is, hey, we did nothing, but we think it's international transport. And I think EPA sent a very, very clear message on that. So again, it's there. We think we got, probably one really, really good shot at an international transport. So again, I think the best strategy is that we try what we can get in place, show again that we had this comprehensive list, and we still can't get there from here. And we really do believe it's international transport. On the second question, Tim, what I would say is, that list is obviously not applicable to every single entity. And so, no, I wouldn't expect you to take, all 109 measures there. The things that, jump out to me is like fleet replacements, things that are more specific to a municipality. Again, you don't have to do that. There's no legal requirement, but if you want to go above and beyond and you think we have things set aside monetarily that you can do that, that's absolutely great. So what I would say is, again, go through that list, and we're certainly happy to sit down with you and say, hey, this is at least what we think might be more applicable to a municipality. But the thing to remember there is if you commit to it and it goes into a state implementation plan, it's federally enforceable at that point. There is kind of no reversing it. So I don't want to discourage folks to do that, but also want to let folks know, just, eyes wide open. If you make those kind of commitments and it goes into a SIP, then it is going to be federal enforceable and you will have to do that. Now, the other part of that is not everything has to go into a SIP. And if you don't want to make those kind of commitments in a state implementation plan, still having any kind of the emission controls or programs that you see on that list, that's good too. So if you want to implement that at a municipality level and you just don't want to commit to it in the SIP, at the end of the day, what matters most is what we see at the monitor. So even if you want to do those control programs, do a fleet replacement, but you just not, have the same certainty on budget or, electeds come and they go. Again, even just committing on a community level to say, hey, we can do this, but we just don't want to put in the SIP. At the end of the day, what matters most is the concentrations at the monitor. So again, we're just encouraging folks, whether it goes into a SIP or not, that's good, just good. It's just good, a good process regardless.
Really quick, from a process standpoint, if this list gets approved by the regional council, we will send out what we call a model resolution package. And we'll tailor those, one for the state, one for the county, one for locals. And in that package, it says what needs to be in a commitment, staffing levels. Do you have the authority to implement this measure? Can you have the finances to do it? And at that point, we could just include, for the locals, we would probably just include measures that would be applicable to local agencies that we think. And so that will help with the process a little bit. And then I would say again, too, there's no restriction either. Like if there is something a local wants to do, or the county or state for that matter, that isn't on this list, go ahead and make a commitment to do that as well. This isn't, so if there's an idea that comes up outside of this list, please, you're free to make a commitment to do that as well.
Just a follow up. We have one of the most notorious ozone monitors in the valley, but we know that's because it transports up from the other areas of the valley and goes into our mountains. Is that going to be looked at as a specific problem, or are we taking the valley in whole as far as the non-attainment and the monitor readings?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the unfortunate part is it's unlike PM10 where we can look at it more as a local pollutant and take more local controls. Ozone is a regional issue. And so, Tim, to your question, the short answer is we have to take a regional approach to it. So there's no saying, hey, this one transports a little bit from this town or this, because it actually sloshes back and forth. So what happens in one part of the valley bounces around. So unfortunately, like I say, unlike PM10, it's more localized pollutant. We can be able to take more localized control. This one is area wide. So there is no carve outs, if you will, for any kind of monitor that is not considered, quote, producing it, or an area is not producing it. I guess we're all in this together. So it's a regional pollutant, so it'll be taken as a regional plan.
Very good. Thank you.
Kelly, do you want to try one more time?
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and it's good. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This is Kelly McKenzie, ADEQ. I just wanted to thank everyone at MAG for sending out the draft suggested list of measures to reduce ozone in this non-attainment area. And we have had a look at it, and we did note that there is a number of suggested measures that are listed for state implementation. And this is just a comment. Generally, ADEQ is supportive of measures that are cost effective, that will be helpful to protective of the NACs, but also that we will have legislative and stakeholder engagement support of. So it's just a comment that we may have some legislative things that we need to move past if we're able to implement certain measures. So it's just a general comment. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I think Kim has another follow-up.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bring in the doom and gloom question there earlier, but couple of things I want to put out there. First of all, as the county, if any of the cities or Kelly, you at the state or anybody, we're happy to meet with anybody at any point and talk about any of these measures as well, because we do recognize anything we make a commitment to ends up being a rule, and that affects a lot of people. And so we definitely want to reach out, and we will do our best to engage early and often as we figure out what commitments we're going to be making and what we can do. Just a few other things that I kind of want to, so that's definitely available. If you don't have my contact information, Tim and Matt do, and so half the county does. It's okay. But there was a couple of other things I just kind of wanted to put out there too, that as we're looking at the list and as we're doing things on this, we weren't 100% comfortable with some of the emissions calculations. And we were kind of hoping that at some point we might be able to get the actual figures that Ramble used, so we could compare them against why we're getting different numbers than they are, especially as we try to make some commitments. Now, when we make a commitment, we intend to make it with our emission calculations, not Ramble's, with whatever we end up deciding on that. But it would be nice to see theirs, because see if there was something we missed that they calculated differently. And some of the cost analysis as well, we would like to know how they came up with some of those numbers so that we can confirm them and use them, or look at them and see how they are regionally, or how did they use national numbers? Did they use regional numbers? Whatever that may be, it would be nice, because we just want comfortable with them, because we didn't know where they came from on that cost analysis. So we would like more of that as we decide what we're going to commit to. And again, back to, and then the authority thing, I know that that's a whole lot of stuff on there as far as who really has authority. There's a lot of stuff there that until the state has authority, we don't have authority. So it's complicated there. And I know getting something changed, as Kelly is well aware at the state, that something changed legislatively. That extreme plan would be working on is probably when those would be taking effect. It just takes so long to get anything through the state legislature. So we just wanted to kind of put those out there, as that those were some of the concerns that we had on this. That's not to say that we don't see this going forward and want to support the action and everything. And again, we're very supportive of, if industries have questions, want to come talk to us about things that they want to make commitments on, but they want to be involved in how that rulemaking is, or anything along those lines. We can do that. Just to kind of give you guys an example, we've already done what MAG is talking about in our RAC SIP, and we've made commitments to make rule adjustments in that, because we knew we could never get the rule done in time to actually submit it. So we're submitting it with those commitments. EPA told us that with those, then they'll come back to us when they go to review it and say, well, did you finish your commitments? And at that point, we'd have to show where we're at in that process with that. So just wanted to throw that out there. And again, we definitely do want to work with anybody, contact us. And again, we'll try and reach out to anybody that we're thinking about doing something that would have an impact on them. So thank you.
Madam Chair, I just quickly answer that question. I think to anybody else is the Ramble report was really just set up with, I think like Matt had described earlier, some generalized numbers, best available information, but we worked with many stakeholders who had more site specific information. Please do. Well, we will be happy to provide that information. One, it's a public document, but two, it was just a starting point, I think, just to give us an idea of the kind of return on investment, if you will, is okay, here's what we see in terms of maybe some of the bigger bangs for the bucks, but by no means is it exhaustive or perfect. So we're happy to share that with Maricopa County, Pinell, or any of the stakeholders that decide they want to go into that. Again, refining the numbers is great. It was really just kind of a starting point in terms of ROI.
Okay, thank you. Do we have others online?
That's all, Madam Chair.
Okay. Oh, Ramona, go ahead.
Sorry, Ramona again. So Tim, before we move on to maybe an action, could you review one more time the kind of the timeline and expectation? Because I know it's going from us, if we approve it, to move forward and going to the management regional council. And then from there, what is the expectation so that we can get comments or commitments or whatever it is from either county or local, and so that we can help you build some modeling and so, you know, what is the timelines so that we can kind of take that back to our jurisdictions?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, that's a great question. So management is usually, it's going to be what, April 12th or just thereabout. So that'll be the next stage where this list will ultimately go. And then April 26th is when regional council will ultimately approve, disapprove, or modify it. So again, for here, I think it's important. This is a recommendation to management. Management will then do the same. They will either accept, modify, or disapprove. If it's approved or modified, then that goes to regional, and that is final approval quote for the list. But like we talked about, unfortunately, we're on borrowed time, but again, you guys need time to evaluate this. So I think a few months, turnaround in terms of the conversations, what are the commitments? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of technical assessment and economic assessment there. So I think realistically, today would be great, but we know it's more like 2 or 3 months before I think we really start to see things trickle in. I'm kind of looking over at Matt, but I think that's generally the time frame we want. Again, we're on borrowed time, so sooner than later is certainly best. But again, you guys got to talk to your folks. We just know that the wheels of democracy grind on, sometimes quickly, sometimes a little bit slower. But I think we'd hope to start to see things back maybe 2 months after April 26th, 2-3 months there, where we're starting to have some substantive discussion. Okay, these are the commitments we're really seeing. Like Matt said, I think that's a great idea to have the cut points. We're starting to see this level of emission reductions associated with that. So yeah, sometime around, where does that put us? June-ish, maybe mid-June is where we start to really kind of hope that we got something substantive back in place. But again, we're on borrowed time, so sooner than later is certainly, I think, the real timeline. But realistically, it's probably mid-June.
And I hate to have more meetings, but I think that our stakeholder meetings just to get to this point was very helpful, and maybe some stakeholder meetings so that that maybe by type, like I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Like, I know that the local municipalities might want to have a meeting so that they know what everybody's committing to, and does that make sense to take that back to their councils if they know kind of where others are going. That was just a suggestion from my organization, because they would kind of like to know what others are doing so that they can kind of gauge that and take that to their council.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, yeah, we can certainly do workshops like we were doing. We're committed to this process. So whatever you guys find informative, if that's a workshop, if you want to agendize an update meeting for this meeting, that's certainly an option, or both. We can have industry workshops if you think it's better to segregate out into those. But again, we're committed to the stakeholder process throughout. So you just let us know what is most impactful and important to you guys, and we're happy to schedule however you guys see that. So we can do that as a large group. We can do that as industries. We can do that as municipalities. We're happy to come talk to your municipalities. We've done some of those presentations as well. Just if that helps you kind of do these types of presentations to show where we're at. But again, we're committed to it throughout the process. So just let us know how we can be helpful, and we'll certainly schedule.
You're okay. Okay, so I think that concludes the discussion portion. So prior to a motion, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on agenda item number 5? Okay, seeing none. I have not received any requests to speak cards for this item. And staff, do we have any written comments for this item?
Madam Chair, as of today, no written comments have been received.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, we have received comments on the list as part of the workshop, but in terms of comments on this agenda item, we have not received them. But yes, we have received your comments. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so is there a motion to recommend approval of the draft suggested list of measures to reduce ozone in the Maricopa non-attainment area to the MAG Management Committee?
This Walt Bouchard, so moved.
Okay, thank you. And do we have a second?
Tim Connor, second.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, is there a point of discussion I could still make?
I'm sorry, who was speaking?
This is Tim Connor.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I would still like to reinforce the transport issue.
Are you?
Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, Tim.
I would still like some way the transport issue be communicated to the next step up the ladder. Also, I guess the question I have is that it seems like a lot of the ozone that we have is VOC. And I'm not sure what we can do about that. So it's another consideration that we need to somehow have some resolution with, but not to change the vote or anything of that nature, because I think it's all part of the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So we have a motion from Walter Bouchard and a second from Tim Connor. So can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. And those who wish to abstain from the vote, say abstain. Okay, now we will move on to the roll call vote of all members participating virtually, which will be taken at this time by Lisa Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Walter Bouchard.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. Kelly McKenzie.
Aye.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Michael Denby.
Abstain.
Thank you. Renee Pressler.
Aye.
Thank you. Stephanie Garcia. Derek Castaneda.
Aye.
Thank you. Ron Gritman.
Aye.
Thank you. Hondo Judd.
Abstain.
Thank you. Aaron Cooper.
Abstain.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro. Rhonda Humbles.
Abstain.
Thank you. Scott Tobias.
Aye.
Thank you. Stan Ballon.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Abstain.
I'm sorry, Kristen, we didn't hear you.
Abstain.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Jonathan Fudge. Jonathan Fudge.
Abstain. Sorry, muted.
Thank you. John Woods.
Abstain.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone?
Robert Vonnenacker, City of Buckeye. Aye.
I'm sorry, will you repeat yourself, please?
Robert Vonnenacker, City of Buckeye.
Thank you, Robert.
Madam Chair, if I could make sure, I wanted to abstain from the vote too.
One moment, please. Madam Chair, we have 16 ayes, 7 abstentions, and we do have an affirmative majority vote.
Thank you, Lisa. Did you get Ms. Stevens' abstention?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Okay. The motion passes, so we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is the MAG Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee Vice Chair Vacancy Letters of Interest. Tim from Maricopa Association of Governments.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, you've heard plenty from me today, so I'll make this one quick. So just in terms of process, come June 1st, June 30th, the chairs will expire. So the vice chair will move to the chair, and then we'll be soliciting letters of interest for the vice chair position. So ultimately, executive committee will vote on that, and those letters are due May 1st. So if folks on the committee are interested in being vice chair, please submit those to MAG, and then we'll continue to move those up the chair.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 7 is a request for future agenda items. Are there any requests by membership for an item on a future agenda? I guess as a question to MAG, would this be the location to address Ramona's suggestion of having kind of top focused stakeholder groups on some of these control measures and the associated commitments, or would that be separate from a committee agenda?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, but maybe offer a suggestion. I think it depends on whether you want to be subject to open meeting laws, or if you want just a more free-form kind of workshop. We had done the original list of suggested items as a workshop. I think gives us a little more freedom to talk, but it's really up to you. If it wants to be a more formal discussion on the record, obviously the agendizing it for this meeting would be that. If you want the more informal discussions, not subject to open meeting laws, then that would be a workshop.
Okay, thank you. Then I think a workshop is appropriate for that kind of discussion. Okay, any requests by membership online for a future agenda item? Okay, hearing none. Business is now concluded. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
This is Ramona. I'll motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Ramona. Have a great afternoon, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.